Hey guys, I'm Johanna, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to get a little bit technical because I'm talking about the scientific plausibility of Plato's Atlantis. Just to explain why I'm doing this video, I am in a current very heavy debate with my father about the plausibility and the realisticness of Atlantis. And he basically doesn't believe that, he believes Plato made it up completely for his own reasons. And there's no way that science could back up what Plato is claiming. And I thought, okay, let me see if I can counter that argument. And so I did. So I did a ton of research and I watched all of Randall Carlson's Atlantis explained series that he does on his own YouTube channel, and it's like 10 hours. I watched like 10 hours of this, and what I've done is I've taken notes and I'm going to try and explain in my way, in like layman's terms, all of the scientific information that we have right now on the location of Atlantis, or what Plato said. Basically, is what Plato said possible? Turns out it is. Very, and I will explain why. Okay, so just to put like Atlantis into like a quick little bit of context. So obviously Plato was this dude that was alive in around 300 BC, and he wrote, around that time, he wrote a dialogue called Critias and Timaeus. You can literally like read it online or buy it on Amazon. And it was a dialogue in the style that he does many of his other work. Oh! Gonna go well. It was written in his style, which was a dialogue, so he's basically creating characters to talk to each other, but they're going to be sharing a story or information, and it's how he wrote his stuff. But in this one, he prefaces this one, and only this one, out of all the other dialogues, he talks about myths and legends a lot, and he uses them for allegory. But in this specific one, he prefaces the whole thing by saying, although this is a strange tale, it is actually true. And he records how he heard about it, which was through his great-great-grandfather Solon, who was around 600 BC. So in the chain of events of how Plato heard this tale, he heard it through four people, four generations of grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-grandfathers. And he said that he's going to try and write it down to the best of his ability, to his memory, that he can remember. He's going to try and write it down as he heard it. He basically claims that his great-great-grandfather Solon went to Egypt in 600 BC, and he sat down with like the wise old priest sages, the history keepers and the record keepers of Egypt, and they had a discussion, and they told Solon that the Greeks had no idea how old human history really was, and they can only remember one deluge. The Greeks can only remember one like natural catastrophe, because Crete did get like there was like a natural disaster in Crete at like 1500 BC, which the Greeks remember. Anyway, the Egyptians were like, yo, history is actually really old. In fact, our records go back, guess how long? 8,000 years. And like Egypt's really, really, really old, older than what you think it is. And not only that, was before Egypt was a thing, or before any civilization in the world was a thing that we know of today, there used to be a previous civilization, and they were really advanced, but not in the way that science fiction likes to portray it. Plato says absolutely nothing about there being machines or flying cars or electricity or anything like that. He just says that they were advanced because they were seafaring, and they had a military, and they had a priesthood, and they had religion, and they had maths and astronomy and architecture. Nothing in there is super woo-woo. Nothing in there is anything that human beings haven't proved that they can already work out and do. Like, all they're saying is that it was just happening a long, long time ago. 9,000 years prior to 600 BC was what the Egyptians were claiming, that this ancient civilization were destroyed in a natural cataclysm that utterly destroyed their empire, and the island which the capital city was on, because the Atlantean Empire was not just one island or one place, it was a whole 10 kingdoms. So I personally believe that Atlantis was kind of all over Spain, the top of Africa, all the islands around the Canary Islands, and any other islands that were in the Atlantic Ocean. That was all Atlantis, like the civilization. But the city, which was Atlantis, is actually the name of the city. And even though that's a Greek name for it, it could have been called Bobtown. We don't know. Atlantis, the center city that disappeared in a day and a night and fell into the ocean, was in the mid-Atlantic. Out from the Straits of Gibraltar, you hit some islands, and then you would continue on, and then you would hit the capital, and if you continued on from then, you would hit a continent, i.e. America. Okay, so that's the story in a nutshell. I mean, most people do know the story of Atlantis, but just in case you didn't, there we are. Today, I'm looking for any science that can show me the plausibility that there was a landmass or an island in the mid-Atlantic. Is it possible that there was a landmass and that it sunk? So we have the story of Atlantis recorded from Plato from literally 300 BC, and we've always sort of had it in the history books. And then it was really around, people weren't like that interested in it. It was really in 1888 when a man called Ignatius Donnelly, what a name, Ignatius. Hi, my name's Ignatius. Anyway, Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book called The Antediluvian World, and it became really popular with the Victorians, and then it kind of like kick-started more of like a fan group of the whole Atlantis myth, and people got more into searching for it. And then after the turn of the century, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s, oceanography became more of a thing, and people were going out into the mid-Atlantic, and they were doing all kinds of sciencey trips and expeditions and writing papers, and there are things in those papers that create huge question marks. And really, I'm going to say it, they point to the fact currently at the bottom of the mid-Atlantic Ocean, the rock that's at the bottom used to be at the top. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Then in 1978, there was a book or an article called Atlantis, Fact or Fiction, and it claimed categorically that they had scanned the ocean floor and they couldn't see a sunken landmass of any kind or a sunken continent. So it was therefore physically impossible that Plato was talking about anything real and that he made it up. And after that date, people then decided to look for Atlantis elsewhere because they took that at face value. However, what that article or book didn't address was all of the gaping holes and questions and the science that people on previous expeditions had found at the bottom of the ocean. They didn't answer those holes. So I think they were massively premature to just completely write off, because I don't think scientifically you can claim that there is entirely no possibility, because a lot of stuff points to the opposite. But people decided to go all over the world, and they decided to go, oh, Atlantis is in the Antarctic, or Atlantis is in the Caribbean, or in India, or in England, or in wherever. And then that kind of didn't help the plausibility of Atlantis, because then Atlantis became this crazy fantasy myth that anybody could kind of hypothesize when and where, and you could kind of pull and stretch and fit and change Plato's texts and make it fit anywhere in the world. Like, oh, well, maybe he said east, but he really meant west. Or like, oh, maybe the Strait of Gibraltar is actually not that one, but it's in Australia. Like, and it becomes a bit of a fantasist dream. Anybody can find Atlantis because anybody can just make it up out of anywhere. So Atlantis basically became this big kind of mythological joke that nobody could find, whereas people stopped trying to look for evidence in the original place where Plato says it was. So, are you ready? Are you buckled in? Because I'm about to throw some serious science at you, but I am going to try and say it in the most digestible way possible. Take notes, tell your family. There was a paper that was printed talking about the Glacial eustatic in English means the changes in the sea from the melting of the ice glaciers. 12,000 years ago, the world was in an ice age, and there was a huge amount of ice sheets covering pretty much all of like North America, the north of like Scandinavia, like all the north of the wall. Around 9,600 BC, something happened, most probably a comet, the Younger Dryas comet event, hit several times, several places in this ice sheet in North America, instantly melted the ice sheet, and thousands, if not millions of tons of fresh water plunged into the Atlantic Ocean. And what this study was talking about was what happens to the sea level and also the seabed when an event like that happens. Even a small amount of water entering into the sea from like a melted glacier affects the sea and it affects the seabed. And millions of metric tons of water throwing in is going to make the seabed, if this is America and this is like the Atlantic Ocean seabed, if the water's all pouring in, it's going to do this for a time. So this is going to go up as this goes down, and as the water comes out, it's going to cause a movement, because you know what? The Earth is actually like a lot of hard crust with like a gooey center, like a cream egg. And the plates are movable, they're flexible, and according to these studies, they don't just move horizontally like I've kind of always been told. There is serious evidence that the plates move also vertically, up and down, as well as horizontally. There's a kind of whole thing going on. If you look at maps of the Atlantic Ocean, you can see the Atlantic Ocean ridge, which is a trifecta. 3 plates meet in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, causing a crazy weak spot for the crust of the Earth. It's the place in the ocean where 3 plates meet, and therefore there's a serious weakness, and there's lots of activity going on there. You can also see this with these like horizontal lines that you can see on maps and scans of the ocean, the crust. It looks like stretch marks going out across. And these, when they've been studied, in this study is saying that these sort of stretch marks and horizontal lines must be caused not just by horizontal moving of the plates, but also vertical bends. It's like stretching the Earth's crust, and it's causing these long, big stretch marks that are coming out right way across the ocean floor. So not only is the very precise location where Plato is saying that there was a landmass that a civilization lived on in the Ice Age, it is on the most geographically weakest point of the entire ocean. If there was anywhere that there was going to be some trouble, if like a global cataclysm hit, probably going to be at the very center of the place where the 3 plates meet, and you're already on a bit of dangerous ground. I mean, I've always heard, even from a kid, like, don't live on a fault line. It's dangerous. That stuff moves. Okay, not only that, in a study in 1948, they went down and they literally dredged up and they tested bits of rock from the Azores Plateau, which is now about 3,000 foot below sea level. It's on the seabed down there. And they dredged up the rock to test it and see what it was, and they found granitic detritus. I'm so sorry, Randall, if I'm not saying this right. They found granitic detritus, which essentially is continental rock, which is land. It's land mass. It's rock that has to have been formed in the air. So there is a huge argument, science-wise, that a chunk of continental land, or continental rock, when the continents split all those many, many years ago, and you know that lot went that way and became Europe, and that lot went that way and became America, that there actually was a chunk of it stuck in the middle of the ocean. And not only that, but that chunk, which was once above water, has essentially done this at different points in time. They also found in a separate study that high magnesium calcite, which you can test this in a lab, and you can test with like a crystallization process, or you can test it the decrystallization process. It can tell you whether or not the rock was formed underwater or above. And guess what? It was formed above. At some point in time, the rock that was at the bottom of the Azores right now was not at the bottom. Mm-hmm. In 1948, there was an expedition published in National Geographic by a guy called Maurice Ewing, and he was exploring the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and I think this is the dude that was collecting all the rocks and stuff, and he was proving that there was like continental rock at the bottom of the ocean that was once above. And in 1949 he did a follow-up article, 3,000 foot below, they found prehistoric sand. I mean, the theory being that sand is made through the process of being on a shoreline in shallow water because of like the movement of the waves that do not happen at the lower depths. So sand was beach sand, it's beach. And when they tested it, it was prehistoric beach sand. There was a beach somewhere in the mid-Atlantic at some point. It's now on the bottom. In 1947 to 1948, there was a Swedish deep sea exploration by Hans Petersen, and it got published in 1954. It's called The Ocean Floor. And in there, they also have a theoretical basis that would account for a sunken landmass in the time frame that we are talking about. They tested some of the rocks there was like shallow water limestone that was found at the bottom, as well as this continental granite type rock. There's shallow water limestone, which again can be made, it has to be made in shallow water, not right down there at the bottom. And when they tested it, they dated it to around 12,000 BC. So not only have we discovered that there is prehistoric sand, there is shallow water limestone, which can only be formed in times of immersion. So you've got immersion, which is going underwater when things get immersed, and then you've got immersion, which is when things go up out of the water. And the testings on the rocks at the bottom show that they are continentally formed chunks of continent, that there is shallow water limestone formed in times of immersion, and also prehistoric sand, as in there was once a beach, which is now at the bottom. We also know that the tectonic plates right in the center on the ridge move vertically up and down. And when they tested like the time zones for the movement of up and down, at some point the rock that they're testing that was immersed was sometime in the late Cenozoic age, which the late Cenozoic age is anything from the last couple 100,000 years up to the last 10,000. So it is perfectly scientifically plausible, based on all of these different studies, that the Azores Plateau, which is currently 3,000 feet below water, was at one point above water, possibly in the last 10,000 years. Plato entirely made this up. If he just decided to make up this story that he invented, that his granddad, great-great-great-grandfather passed down to him, and he just made up an island, the location of the island is scientifically plausible. It's bang on. It's actually bang on. In fact, if there was anywhere else in the world that he'd pointed this island to, realistically, that trifecta fold of all of the tectonic plates is gonna be the place that you bet your money on, where if a disaster hit, it's gonna be bad. Also, the date that he claims that he was told that this happened, science is now telling us that there was a massive global cataclysm, 9,600 BC, exactly on the money. So he not only got the location bang on, he got the date. And I'm just thinking about the mathematical plausibility of somebody just inventing that. And like, if I just wrote a story right now about an island that disappeared into the ocean, and I just picked a date and I picked a location, what are the chances that I would pick the very location that would lie on a tectonic plate weak spot, and I'd pick the date that science is now saying the world basically collapsed? I'm with Plato on this one. Also, in 1988, there was a study that was published in the Science Journal, and it was all about the position of the Gulf Stream. So during the Quaternary glaciation, basically the Ice Age. So in the Ice Age, what was the Gulf Stream and all of the movement of the Atlantic waters? It was different to what it was today. Today, water gets heated up at the equator, it comes up past America, it goes into the Mexican Gulf, it gets warmed up there, and it shoots out across the Atlantic, and it goes quite far up, and it hits Iceland and England, and it warms like north of France, and it keeps all that area like nice and warm. Thank you very much, Gulf Stream, you're keeping my island good. But back in the Ice Age, Different thing. It didn't go into that part of America, and it didn't go as far up high because there was an ice age and it was all ice. But what it did do was it circled from the equator up around the Atlantic in almost a perfect circle and would encircle the Azores Plateau. So if a civilization was choosing a place to live back in the Ice Age, you weren't going to pick a place for your capital city that's going to be like in the Ice Age. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that the location of the Azores Plateau, it's beautiful climate-wise in the Ice Age because it's being warmed up by the Gulf Stream. So again, if you were hypothesizing about where you were going to live or where a civilization may put their roots down, I mean, this would have been beautiful. Would have been a little island, nice and warm, surrounded by warmed up Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so in the words of Randall Carlson, and I literally owe all of the research to him in this video, it is possible in the geophysical understanding of the way that the world works, as we know, it is possible, some would argue, even plausible, that Plato was correct. So if anybody comes at you with saying, oh, Plato just made it up for an allegory, there's no way that there can be a sunken landmass in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you can go, actually, no, that's not true, because I can quote you several scientific papers and expeditions that actually attest to the opposite. And did you know that exactly where Plato pointed out Atlantis to be is where there is the tectonic plate fold? And did you know that they move up and down, not just like this? And at one point, the bottom of the ocean was at the top in the time frame that Plato said it was. Boom, mic drop. I don't have a mic drop. Just use some scissors. I mean, they haven't found Atlantis, and none of these scientists were claiming that they found Atlantis. All they're saying is that there's some questions that need to be looked into. And the fact that the Science Journal of 1978 completely ruled it out, they did not answer the questions from all these previous expeditions of how is there prehistoric sand at the bottom and how can there be granite rock and etc, etc, etc. I hope this makes sense to you. Let me know in the comments what you think. If this has helped at all, again, let me know. I'm going to show this video to my dad and I'm going to see what he says, and I bet he still doesn't believe, because thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, then why don't you give me a little cheeky subscribe, or just like press me a like, oh god. Or even just leave a comment. It just really helps. It's a great way that you can just help support me for free. Share me with a friend. It's all good. Well, I'm going to love you and leave you. Oh my god, the builders are so loud. Okay, until next time, happy hunting.